All right, ready to start. What you're looking at on the screen is a screenshot of our user manual, and each of those are chapters in the user manual that relate to one of the calculators within Solomon. Last week, we covered the theory, age life depreciation, and marginal cost. Uh, then we talked about a little bit on navigation, how to get around the calculator. And then three different ways to calculate depreciated cost adjustments. Sidekick, you input effective age and economic life. Solomon adjustment, you input remaining economic life. And Solomon cost is kind of the bedrock tools, because there we are actually using the cost approach to extract and support effective age from market data. So that's, I believe, when depreciated cost truly becomes market related or market derived adjustments. Today, we're going to be talking about four additional calculators. Solomon Cost New, that's to do cost adjustments when there's no depreciation. Solomon Site, extracting a site value from a sale with similar site characteristics. Site value is also an assignment result that we need to support. And then we're going to skip manufactured housing, but we'll be talking about Solomon Market Time, how to develop and, more importantly, document a market time adjustment from a rate of change that you find in other ways outside of Solomon. We don't calculate the rate, but a lot of times MLS can help you do that. And then secondary data is where we're going to start. That is applying survey data percentages to the market value of comparable properties. So secondary data has been relatively popular with our users, and I think we'll start with that. So here we go. Okay, to log into Solomon, this website, by the way, is the one that I can maintain without being a developer, so I can put things in here like the newest videos. And by the way, this newest video is like 32 minutes long and divided into chapters, and it's end to end on Solomon. So let me log in here. Now we just hopped over to a secure website that's hosted by, I think it's AWS. But down here on the left, we've got this menu. You can make this menu collapse. You can make it disappear. But we're going to secondary data. And to use this, all you do is enter the sale price of a comparable property. I'm going to say $400,000. And we have taken surveys of appraisers spread around the country, and I'll explain that in a minute. But if you have a $400,000 sale and there's zero concessions, the market value is $400,000. By clicking this button, it will apply a percentage from the surveys for adjustments like a third bedroom. Notice that's a lot higher than a fourth bedroom. A busy road, backing to the freeway, a water tower, power lines, railroad tracks, and commercial property. Now, I recognize that a busy road is not a busy road. I had a case yesterday where one of them had a very busy road and one of them had a kind of a busy road. So don't use these like they're part of a physics equation or a chemistry equation. These are just survey results to kind of guide. Central air for a Q3 house was a higher adjustment than a Q4, which makes sense. And that really depends on where you are in the country also. In-ground pool, we had data that showed a cold winter pool is worth $12,000 for a $400,000 house. And by the way, that's 3%. And I'm going to change this now to 100 so you can see the percentages. So you see that the busy road is 4.9%. In fact, when I was being trained, I asked my mentor, many times, what do you adjust for this? And he would never tell me. He would always say paired sales. But the one time he slipped up, we were in the car and he turned his head and he winked at me and he said, those yellow lines are worth 5%. So either Jim knew the same thing that all these other appraisers knew, or I guess by Wisdom of crowds, maybe he was right. I think appraisers do learn adjustments, and now we're being asked to support them. But the survey data is a good way to see if we're in the ballpark. So the cold winter pool, 3% of the value of the house, 5% for a mild winter, and then almost 8% for a warm winter location. The pole building, comes into play when they're in the outlying areas where they've got a 1,000 square foot pole building, gravel floor, just metal siding, not very complex. So $9.11 per foot. And then the steel building, the one that we had in the survey, was on a nice concrete slab. It probably had an entrance door as well as the garage door. 1,000 square feet, had heat, and I don't know about heat. It had electricity. So those are like $20 a foot, 21. This might be coming in handy for you to support site improvements. Just average site improvements was the question in the survey. 4.8% for city sewer and water, 6.1% for well and septic. And then these condition, we've got 2 for condition. A 3 versus a 4 is about 7%. A 4 versus a 5 is about 9%. And notice that it goes up on the other side too. 2 versus 3 is a higher adjustment than 3 versus 4. Now, one thing about condition adjustments, we're supposed to have data from the market. This is secondary data. This is not data from the market. It's a survey of appraisers scattered around the country. And I'll show you how that works. We try to follow a method that's been received by science. And in fact, here's a link to the website. But before we do that, this was a discovery that's now become known as wisdom of crowds. The discovery was made by Francis Galton, Sir Francis Galton. He was knighted by the Queen of England back in 1890 or something. But he was a scientist that studied genetics primarily. And he used statistics to study genetics. One of his students was Carl Pearson, who actually started the first statistics program at, I think it was Oxford in England. But he would be on the Mount Rushmore of statistics. This is his methodology. He was the first one that ever used a questionnaire. He's the one that discovered regression. He named that regression coefficient R, and we'll talk about that a little bit next time. And he also was the one that was the first to name, he called it the middlemost, but it's the median. He was the guy that was behind the definition of the median. And what wisdom of the crowds says is there's 4 things. If there are 4 conditions met, you've got a pretty good survey. The aggregation is the part that I did, where I took all of the answers and turned them into a percentage. The estimates need to be independent. In other words, people can't know what the other people are answering. They need to be decentralized. In other words, not all in one market, but around the country, which might cast a little bit of doubt on this for you. And then they have to have diverse points of view. These are, the way he phrased it is that non-experts, a group of non-experts, in other words, in our language, it would be a non-market expert of a local market, no market expertise, but they understand the question. The question has an answer, that's a number. And if you combine 30 or more, you get a better result than if you just took one of those one expert opinion. That's his whole premise. So here's the 2022 appraiser survey. We asked questions and sent it out to a bunch of appraisers, and we had a varying number of responses. But for instance, for the low traffic residential street adjustment, number 6, the way we asked the question gave us a number that we could turn into a percentage. So assume you're appraising a house on a low traffic street, an identical house just sold on a busy street for $400,000. What would that house have sold for on a low traffic street? Well, here's the survey results further down. If you go down to number 6, this is the statistical output from Excel. The mean was $420,000. right? And so there's the low traffic street, 420.6. The busy road was 400. So the difference is $20,642, which is 4.9%. So that's what goes behind the surveys. You can read more about that on your own time. But we're going to move ahead now to the next topic, which is market change. So we've got a tool for that, market time. I'm just going to save some time and type in 1, 2, 3, and 4. You would type in the address of the comp. Comparable sale price. Concessions. I don't think concessions are part of market value, so I subtract those. If you want to leave them in, just leave that blank. The comparable contract date. Let's say that this property sold on August 2nd, or I should say came under contract on August 2nd. And the effective date is today. And the annual rate of appreciation is 4%. So when I click calculate, the first thing it does is it subtracts and finds out how many days have transpired. And then it takes those number of days and divides by 365 to get the percent of a year and multiplies that by 4. And the adjustment is $4,000. Now, if you prefer dollars per day, and there are techniques to get dollar per day adjustments, $50 a day is $5,200. Now, if you'll notice that we've already filled in some of the information on the other comps to make it a little bit quicker. So here's comp 2, 400. Let's say there were concessions of 0. And the contract date was back on June 1st. So there's 167 days. At 4% is $73.20. At $50 per day, it was $83.50. And if I change this to $40 a day, see if it gets a little bit closer. Okay. Comp 3, again, a $400,000 sale price. And this one was just a month ago. So you could take a screenshot of this and put it in your report. If you have more than 4 comps, you would need to do it twice. But it's a way to document how you used the rate of appreciation. I get my rate of appreciation from my local MLS because we've got a tool called InfoSparks. That's very good for that. It compares medians. I've also taught a couple of times how to do a dollar per day adjustment using regression. So I think that one's available at Appraiser eLearning. So the next step, we're going to talk about how cost data works, so we get a better handle on the last 2 topics today, and that's kind of where the fun starts. Those are a little more complex. So cost data is published as a base cost, and let's assume that it's $500,000 for a particular house. They also include area modification factors. I just use the term zip code multiplier. It's synonymous. It means that there's a local effect on the cost. And that effect is in 2 ways. It's both in materials and in labor. And that's data that's published by the cost provider. And in my zip code, this is Minneapolis area, actually, it's 13%. So 13% over 500 is 65. Now, just a word about the zip codes. Every zip code is part of a region. So if I was in 55316, the 16 is the number of the post office. 553 is the zone. So this group of zip codes, 554 is included in that, have an increased cost of 13%. Material and labor, and probably snow load up in Minnesota, where we have to dig deep foundations and put in extra trusses and so on. Now, there's other factors that add to the cost or subtract from the cost that are not related to where the house is built, but things like a repetitive build. If it saves 9% to be building in a subdivision where you're going from one house to the next with the same trades, just moving up and down the street, they publish a 9% savings for a Q4. So now we've got 500,000 plus 65 minus 45, so the net is 520. So the modification factors are published, but we've got another way to do that, and we're going to talk about that next within Solomon. So I'm going to, at this time, go to the menu and go to Solomon Cost New. Now, I don't know about any of you, but the first time when I started appraising, I was pretty impressed with my mentor's cost manual. It was just fascinating to me with all those colored pages, and he was supposed to be getting new pages every quarter and so on. But it kind of fascinated me, and I noticed that my mentor didn't use it anymore because he didn't trust the data. He would just say cost data is based on Marshall and Swift plus local builders, and then he would just make everything else up. So I don't know how common that is. He didn't put much weight in the cost approach, so he didn't try to figure it out, I don't think. But the reason I didn't like the cost approach is that I would know quite a bit about a house that I was going to appraise that was new. Let's say it had an $80,000 site value, a $20,000 site improvements, and my zip code is 55123. I'm here in Eagan, Minnesota, which is a little bit less than the 13%. I think it's around 9. Let's say it's a quality 4 house, and the GLA is 2,500 square feet. And you won't find this in Minnesota, but I'm going to ignore the basement for now. And then the covered porch is 100 feet, and the garage is 440. When I click calculate, we're going to do the cost approach 2 different ways. One is from national building cost, and then one is for the local builder, okay, working towards zero depreciation. I'll show you what that means here. So according to national building cost, that 2,500 square foot house on $100,000 worth of site and site improvements is the replacement cost is $422. There's the site and site improvements. So the total value is $522,755. And I would go through that exercise back when I was new, and I would realize this cost data is worthless. That's nowhere near the cost of this house, right? So maybe the builder was selling these for $500,000. 500,000 goes right here. And now what I'm going to do is figure out what the percentage difference is between those two just by clicking calculate. And what I just found out is that the local market is different than the cost book says it should be. And there's a 4% difference. So that 4% I want to use as a factor. But before I do that, as long as I'm extracting my own factor from the market, I'm going to go up and change this zip code to base. And by doing that, I'm taking the publisher's modification factor for area out of the equations. And I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to use the base cost plus 5% to represent my market. So now I know that my multiplier is 5%. And by doing that, we've created a secondary cost approach. The site value is the same. The dwelling had to change. I think that's the place to change it because that's the biggest number. It's the smallest percentage change. But the difference between 500 and 477, that $23,000, is the same difference between 346 and 369. So there's the dwelling per foot, the fireplace, all these other things I left the same. But now you can see the cost approach has a value of 500, which is what the market should be. And we get zero depreciation by increasing the dwelling cost. And if any of you have questions and you want to schedule a Zoom call with me privately, that's fine. You've got my, I'll put my email up there at the end of the session today. But this is helpful because not only do you get a GLA adjustment and the other adjustments that are fit to the market, but you've also got this factor that you can use when you're doing other calculations in the Solomon tools. So the one I want to go to next, and again, this is a tool that here we've been through these. Now we're going to go to site extraction. And because we've already extracted 5% as the best, our best estimate of the factor in our market, I'm going to use 5% and put that in right there, the factor. So that's going to increase the costs 5%, the cost of the property. So let's say I've got a $400,000 sale, and this would be for an existing home, right, in a neighborhood where there's no site sales. You're trying to figure out what the site is because you want to use the cost approach accurately. For the zip code, I'm going to use base, right, because that's what I used to get this factor of 5%. And let's say the quality is 4, and the GLA is 2,500, and it has central air, and it's got a 200 square foot covered porch and a 44 or 440 square foot garage. If I have 0 effective age, when I click calculate, I'm way off. I've got a negative site value. So you know there has to be some depreciation. So how much depreciation is there? Well, this is where you need to iterate, use the process of iteration, which is part of science. Let's try 15 years effective age. We think that might be a good number. 15 years. Whoops, I forgot one thing. I forgot the site improvements. Now watch, this will drop to 78 because I've got the site improvements in it. So this calculator, this site extraction tool, only works as well as you can estimate effective age. See how at 12, the house is worth more because there's less depreciation. The land has to be less because we've got the sale price fixed at 400. If I go to 20, the land value is going to increase dramatically. So there's a huge trade-off between effective age and site value. And I think from my years, especially since I started using Solomon, site values change more rapidly than pretty much anything else in our industry. When we see building costs relatively stable throughout the year and houses are dropping in value, I think it's because the land is dropping. And and that makes sense. When interest rates are high, builders aren't able to make a profit, so there's less demand for the building lots. And then the contrary is true when the rates are low. Houses that used to be selling for 400 are now selling for 500. I think the underlying land is what's appreciated. So we've covered how to trust the site data, how to trust the cost data by Solomon Cost New. We've extracted a factor. Now we've got some confidence to use this cost data to extract the site value. And we've talked a little bit about the nature of cost data. There's base cost, and that's one pretty, it's a huge volume of work to figure out the base cost for all these different quality levels of houses. So to make that job a little bit more approachable, they use area modification factors to increase or decrease costs by a percentage. And that percentage is based on a zip code. A zip code area is as fine as they get. So 553 through 554 and 555. Those are the first 3 digits of the zip code. Those are what matter. Now, there are times when you will have a new zip code that's not included in our modification factors. In that case, use the closest zip code that is included, or you can go back to our trusty Solomon Cost New. I'll pull that back up and use Solomon Cost New to figure out what the the proper multiplier is for your market.